Have you ever seen a website that asks for your permission to act as one of your other online accounts? Things like logging in with Google, or hey, connecting your Twitch account for Streamlabs or whatever, or GitHub, or even Zapier, trying to connect to Notion, HubSpot, whatever. This is a convenience. It's pretty handy to use one account to work with another, and it is used but also even abused, especially in spear phishing attacks and other risks, cybersecurity threats to an organization, a company, a business, even you, the end user, the individual, or the person working on the computer here. And look, this is all put together. The way this is done when you see that functionality is by using OAuth. OAuth 2.0 is described as an open protocol to allow secure authorization in a simple and standard method from web, mobile, and desktop applications. And you see it all the time, right? Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Microsoft, and it's even accessible in a Microsoft 365 account. I won't beat you over the head with all the ins and outs of things here. I'll include some links in the video description if you'd like to take a look at those resources. But ultimately, look, you'll have enough access granted by a scope, the way that you might be able to interact with the account as one other application is granted the permission to use it. In a lot of those online and cloud services, Microsoft 365 is a prime example. Ultimately, it's a lot of these authorization codes, grant types, things just bouncing around between OAuth and APIs. But there are special tricks you can do when you're offered an application that will ask for your consent, and you grant consent to have, some program, some other service and capability do whatever it might with your account. Obviously, ill-intended threat actors and adversaries, bad hackers, can take advantage of this. They can leverage what we tend to call an illicit consent grant attack. In the case of a Microsoft 365 account or Azure Active Directory Entra ID, look, whatever you want to call it, that could do some damage. Hey, that actor, now granted permission, could then read your email messages. Hey, look through the mailbox, take a look at the other user contacts, maybe other individuals, employees in a company or business, download messages, look through files on OneDrive, Teams, anything else that's just connected at that identity access here. So in this video, I'd like to showcase that OAuth illicit consent grant attack. We'll do the demo and you can follow along. Maybe you could poke and play in your own playground just as well. But over here in my Windows 11 virtual machine, I've got the dark theme rolling, and look, this is the perspective of the attacker. I'm acting as the adversary, putting my hacker hat on, and now let me go ahead and open up my web browser, Firefox. So I'm logged in to Microsoft 365, and this is the account that I'll work with. It's just a Microsoft 365 admin with the tenant 2ntby4.onmicrosoftonline.com. Look, sorry, I know, weird random prefix. This is from the Microsoft 365 developer program, rest in peace. That used to be free and easily accessible for folks to tinker and play, but now, unfortunately, I think that has gone to the wayside. But for the sake of demo, for the sake of education and showcase, we'll be working with this sample here for our account. Now, to do this, the attacker needs their own Microsoft Online tenant so that they can put together a rogue and malicious application that will perform that illicit OAuth consent grant attack. So I'm logged into Azure here, the URL portal.azure.com, and I could go ahead and move into the app registrations here. Again, remember, I'm working as adversary named 2ntby4. We'll go ahead and create a new registered application. Registered? Yeah, whatever, application. We can call it whatever we want. It can be pretty innocent. I don't know, something to fool and trick the user. We'll just call it like security. Maybe you could name it after the victim organization, whatever you want. But it's especially important that the supported account types here are accounts in any organizational directory. Like any Microsoft Entra ID tenant should be multi-tenant. Now, because this is all in the cloud or maybe a web application, you could do this just as well with a desktop app or anything you'd like, but this works well for the phishing scheme. We will need a redirect URI, a link, an actual URL and address that will perform the authentication and have a place to know, okay, this is in fact the app that's handling this authorization and authentication process. What that means is that we need some back-end code. We need a sort of server to be able to handle all this, work with the logic here, and I want to showcase and use this utility called PinAuth. PinAuth? I don't know particularly how you pronounce that, but PinAuth is a Python-based proof-of-concept framework for performing OAuth token stealing campaigns against Office 365 accounts with the Microsoft Graph API. The tool is built on top of the Microsoft Quick Start Python code, so if you'd like, like, you could take a look at that. Microsoft has all their documentation to work with this, play with it in other languages, SDK, you know the drill. But I am going to be pulling something off the shelf, again, just for the quick, simple showcase. You can dive into the code here. Obviously, it's all on GitHub, but I will leave that as an exercise for the reader, if I may. Credit where credit is due, though. It looks like the acknowledgments here in the repository and some of the inspiration came from, hey, some other great resources on this type of attack and tools. Looks like FireEye, I believe what would have been Mandy into now Mandy and Google Cloud, Google, Google, I don't know. MDSec that sparked all this. The blog that I had up previously, this article here, the introduction that I was showcasing and what is OAuth, is their Google Cloud blog and a showcase here, shining a light on OAuth abuse with PwnAuth, a capability they developed way back in 2018. So again, nothing new, nothing novel, still tradecraft that's out and about, but shout out to Douglas Beanstalk for putting this together. As always, we are standing on the shoulders of giants for sweet stuff we do in cybersecurity. They also link MDSec and their blog post introducing the Office 365 attack toolkit. I'd be remiss not to mention them, so cool stuff there. Again, all included links to the video description. One that I think is especially cool to showcase, though, this is actually a more fleshed out framework and toolkit for the 365 Stealer. This comes from our friends over at Altered Security. Very, very cool stuff. This gives a lot more capability to do some more post-exploitation here. That repository has a lot of sweet stuff, and Altered Security, some of the incredible folks over there even have a full-blown blog post to showcase and walk through this entire technique. So please, pretty please, take a look at that, but we'll walk through it, demo it, and do it all in this video. And actually, speaking of Altered Security, they are the sponsor of this video. So if I may please tell you a little bit about
Altered Security. The best way to learn cybersecurity is through hands-on and practical exercises, and having a challenge, something to prove your competency and merit, so the industry knows you're a professional. From the brains behind Nashang and so many other offensive tools, Nikhil Mittal and team brings you Altered Security, with affordable, easy-to-access, and stable cybersecurity training labs. Get certified in on-premise red teaming Active Directory exploitation with their well-known training for CRTP, the Certified Red Team Professional. You can hack Active Directory certificate services with their CESP exam, or level up to become an expert and master with CRTE and CRTM. Tired of on-premise instances? Tackle the cloud with Azure Red Teaming courses like CARTP and CAWASP. On top of that, a number of these trainings are also available as live online training boot camps. Altered Security offers some of the most recognizable certifications and top-tier training in the industry. You can get started learning and sharpening your security skills with my link below in the video description, jh.live/altered security. Huge thanks to Altered Security for sponsoring this video.
All right, last thing for me to squeeze in here. The reason that I was emphasizing the Altered Security 365 Stealer tool so much is because they offer a really sweet sort of like web front end and interface to be able to do more post-exploitation stuff, just clicking around, easy buttons, and that's pretty sweet. Anyway, we'll do this with the small stuff with PwnAuth, so let me go ahead and just grab the code. We'll git clone this repository and get it started. Remember, I am on my attacker virtual machine here, so let's open up a command line. I'll open up the Windows terminal. I'll move into a git directory, and let me git clone down just that PwnAuth tool. We'll move into that directory, and we have a couple files here to work with. The app.py, simple Python script that really gets this thing going. You know, the readme.md, all the same documentation, so we can follow through with the steps, but ultimately we'll want to run the app.py. I believe I am going to end up needing some other repositories here, or excuse me, some other libraries and packages. So we could simply install those. I didn't see requirements.txt in there, but let me pip install Flask. I believe you'll need requests just as well. So once we get that cruising, now we should be able to fire that up. Okay, give me a little bit more. Am I just not seeing a requirements.txt file? No, there's really nothing there. All right, well, let's try it one more time. Okay. Pip install MSAL. Now you know, like, hey, you know, we do this for real, right? Python app.py. How about now? Okay, now we're serving a Flask app on localhost 5000. Now I could go open this up. We can go visit this page and see what it looks like, but their default is pretty boring and basic. Again, that's all right. You could customize if you wanted to. Honestly, it's just for the showcase here, but well, we will need to actually fill out the app that we could use for our Microsoft app and our Illicit OAuth consent grant attack. We still need to put that together. We didn't finish while we were working in the Azure portal. But remember, this is our backend server. This is the logic to be able to handle this, and it needs to be able to redirect to this application, which means it needs to be publicly accessible. I know we've gone now to the real legitimate login Microsoft.online and all, but we wanted to end up cruising back to localhost. Except we can't have it on localhost port 5000 if we were trying to target a real individual and victim here. Look, that needs to be publicly accessible and on the open internet. Normally you'd have a domain, your spear phishing page, whatever you might do, set up a website and fake all this. But I will actually get this cruising again with a terminal to bring this publicly open on the internet with ngrok, and we'll go ahead and install that with Chocolatey. Oh, and I will need to be admin for that, so let's get a different terminal cruising. We can open up another terminal with the UAC or user account control to become a local admin, and then let's use Chocolatey to Choco install ngrok. Yep, we are good to install that. I'll enter A. I love Chocolatey. I'm sorry. I know I try to squeeze it into like every single video, but just being able to do that on Windows is nice. All right, now we should have ngrok. Let me authenticate that to my account so we can spit this to the open internet. We will skip right over that because you don't need to see my ngrok auth token. You can find yours on their website. But look, now that we've got that ready, we could go spin up our Flask server and make sure that is publicly accessible. It's already running for us, but look, that is running on port 5000 on localhost, our 127.0.0.1 IP address. So 5000 is the number we need to know, and we'll go put these side by side, where I'll say ngrok can now have an HTTP server up using our local port 5000, and I believe we could use the schema of just HTTP here. Obviously, if you're doing this for real, again, you've got your fake domain, social engineering scheme, and you've got maybe a Let's Encrypt certificate, or whatever you do to get HTTPS up in there. Now, with that going, we should be able to see, I have this publicly accessible now at this URL, 1D85149, blah, 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 whatever, and that will point to my localhost port 5000. So at this point, we finally have a potential redirect URI that we can configure for our application inside of Azure in the portal here. So let me go ahead and specify this is going to be a web URI. We'll paste that in, and I believe it is just get a token. Oh, it does need to be HTTPS? Are you kidding me? All right, fine. We'll go back to our terminal. We'll close out of the current ngrok tunnel, and then let's remove the tag scheme. So I believe this will just put us on HTTPS, and hopefully that behaves a little bit better. This video, man, we are on the struggle bus, but you know what? We'll get through it. I believe the URL default endpoint for pinauth is /get a token. So let's go ahead and register that and now see if it comes to life here. Successfully created the application security. Of course, you could call that whatever you'd like, but we will need a couple interesting and peculiar special things from this. The application client ID and all the others that are suggested here in the pinauth sort of setup in the README. You need the client secret, of course, our redirect path, scope, and the permissions that we particularly want. All of these should be added into the app config.py file for the setup and structure. So let's go add those in. We'll copy and paste and get that done. We know the application client ID is provided here as this GUID, so we can copy that. And now, since this running instance of the pinauth Flask server doesn't have all the configurations that we need, let me just Control-C to close out of that. And let's go ahead and edit. Do I have Sublime Text in my path? I don't know. No, I don't have it in my path. Dang it. Struggle bus, I'm telling you. Let's navigate to our pinauth here and modify the app config. All right, so we still need to go grab and enter our client secret, but the client ID down here we know, and yep, just as I had a redirect path as /get a token. Of course, you can configure this, but the scope has all the sweet stuff that we might like. Let's go ahead and add in all the permissions that we would like to use and actually steal with our illicit OAuth consent grant attack. Let me harken back to our good friends over at Altered Security and their 365 stealer. I believe they have a good list of some of the permissions we could use and set that up for our own setup here. But again, they walk through all this, so it's kind of cool to see their own explanations. But take a look. Some of the other permissions that we might like to add. You saw user.read, but we could also read from the contacts, email, notes, mailbox settings, read, write, all this. this. Let's go ahead and slap that into Sublime Text. This will be inside of a list of strings for our variable. So let me paste this into Sublime Text. I'll select all of them. I like to use Control-Shift-L to get multi-line keyboard cursors here, but this does need to be in a list of strings for that variable. So let me paste this into Sublime Text. I'll select them all, and I like to use Control-Shift-L to get multiple cursors. We'll just add a ending single quote or double quote there, and then add commas just as needed. And so we can actually decorate this well as a little list here, and then close that out with our square braces. Cool, that's looking good. I'd like user.read just as well. Let's make sure that's in there. All right, so with those configured, now we just need our client secret. So let's go grab that from our app in portal. Back in the Microsoft Azure portal, let's go ahead to add a certificate or secret. Of course, you will need a client secret set up and configured for this. So with that, we'll do our, security. Doesn't really matter when this expires. We'll just go ahead and create it. And with that, we have the value in the secret ID. Now we'll want this secret ID. I know my face is in the way, but trust me, hit the I believe button. I'm going to copy and paste that. Note that this includes a secret ID, but we don't need to dig into that. We are especially interested in the value itself, the actual contents, the data for our client secret. So let me copy that value, and we'll paste that right back into Sublime Text. Now that all of the application client information is configured, saved, staged, and set up here, we should be able to just get back to our terminal and finally, for real, run our app.py with pinoff. Remember, this is running on localhost port 5000, but ngrok is tunneling us out to the open internet. Now, with all that complete, finally, our attacker setup is done. So I am switching perspectives here. Note I'm in a light mode Windows 11 virtual machine, and I'm the victim. Now I'm just a poor innocent folk. Hey, actually in my Microsoft 365 tenant here, this is QFZ0, whatever, that's fine. And say that I were to try and go to my email here. I actually don't have an active M365 license because this is all now dead with the developer program. But say that the attacker had staged, whatever cheesy phishing email, if we wanted to, fake a little Sublime Text here. Urgent update. Security module. Our company is requiring a new cloud application to meet work from home policy mandates. Install our new security module with the link or button, whatever, below here. And you could, of course, fake this, hyperlink, hide the text to be whatever you want. And, your domain would be there anyway, not some cheesy ngrok crap. So say that email was sent, whatever phishing hooks and lures you want. But now let me put these side by side the best that I can. Say we have our attacker on the right, our victim on the left, and some way, somehow, they went to this rogue URL. And now you'll see the connections start to come through with our totally legit sign-in page. We'll go ahead and sign in. And fingers crossed, now we'll be seeing, our account is going to have some permissions requested. We are trying to grant consent here for this illicit OAuth consent grant attack, unverified app for security, and hey, Microsoft doing the best they can to try and limit that attack surface. But look at all the things that it would now have access to, everything that we defined in the scope just previously in our app config Sublime Text. So we'll give consent on behalf of our organization, and we'll accept this. Now, take a look over on the right-hand side as this comes through. Oh, all right, sorry. So for some super quick troubleshooting, it looks like this is going to the right URL, but unfortunately the wrong schema using HTTP rather than HTTPS. I think this is a gimmick with pinoff, so I want to just go double check that. I'm just digging into the app.py code here to see the logic, and this authorized route looks like it will build the app that it needs to have a lot of the online Microsoft authentication here, but it uses the redirect URL with URI4 being authorized. I just kind of want to see that as it comes to life. Can I validate that that is what I think it should be? Now with that, just for some candlelight debugging, let me see if I can now run our app one more time. I just want to be able to see that value as I navigate to it. So back in my web browser, let me paste in just the ngrok address. And yeah, even with HTTPS, okay, it looks like Python or the backend app itself is just stripping that and not giving it as it should be. I think Flask is just doing that because it doesn't know it's going through ngrok. So thankfully, we can clean that up since we know, okay, exactly what it's doing. Let's just change this redirect URI that's built here, and let's replace just the HTTP schema to our HTTPS schema. Oh, closing up a couple parentheses there. That should be good, fingers crossed. Okay, so let's try this again. And you know what? Maybe this is a good thing because we can chat a little bit about the URLs. Let's get back over here and let's use the same ngrok URL. But you know what? Actually, let's do this in a private window so that way it's the full authentication process and you know how this comes to life here. So we have our totally legit sign-in page. We click sign in again, as we should have worked to begin with. And we should actually make that change for replacement in all the other places that it's building out that. Even probably the one that's called, build auth URL. So that redirect URL, let's make sure to replace HTTP again. HTTPS should be there. Now we can save this, and I believe that's all of the URLs that it's using. Good. All right, now let's try this for real this time. Let's start our backend pin auth app. The Flask application, remember that's being tunneled out through ngrok. And you know what? We can do this with a private browser just so you get the full authentication process. And remember, this is the URL, the link, the lure that would have came through a phishing email. So we'll go to that page. We see our totally legit sign-in as we had previously. And now, again, they might fall for the full authentication process. Let's enter our email and password. That is this M365 account in our victim tenant QFZ0. Let's hit next. We'll slap in that password, sign in, and of course, this will probably require some two-factor authentication. So my phone here, let me pull out, we need the number 74. We'll get that done. 74, yes. I approve this sign-in. Little fingerprint biometric, you love to see it. And with that, we can stay signed in. Sure, yeah, I don't care. Regular account user just clicks it all through. Now take a look. You can see over on the right-hand side, of course, you could decorate this to fool and make the charade a little bit more believable. Now, our attacker user has pulled down the token. They have got all the access to that account, and now we have a new user writing to the library. Now, this is just the convenience from the pin auth tool that we use for the demo. Of course, you could write this yourself. You could build out your own little post-exploitation tool, but ultimately, we now have an access and refresh token that came with the authorization thanks to that OAuth consent prompt. This tooling has another Python script if we want to play with some of the post-exploitation work with different modules, so we could tinker with that. We'll explore, but this is really the crown jewel that we wanted all along. Just one of the authorization tokens to act as that account. Let me just open up another terminal, get us back into our git and pinauth folder. Now you'll note there is a new file that's created, our token library.pickle. So it's using the Python pickle library to serialize some of that data, but we should be able to play with the main API, and this is kind of neat. Oh, it's doing some cheesy, I don't know, maybe Linux commands to try and clear the screen. But the available users here, you can see, there is our victim, our M365 admin at that tenant. Let me choose that user number 1. And look, we could get the user, check their token, try to send emails, query their email, access OneDrive, all the sweet stuff that this tooling allows us to do. But you can do anything with the APIs connections that you've got now that you have the token and the access. Let me see if I can get the user. Oh, yep, there is the user and identity, including my name, my account, and everything, including my phone number. Sweet, we should redact that one. And we could do anything else. We can get back to this, maybe try to send an email, the new email, yep, that's fine. To address, whatever. It keeps trying to clear the screen here. It's really getting into this. Man, I probably should have done this on Kali or whatever. This is just showcase. We don't have access to be able to do that anyway. You can see the error message from the REST API. The mailbox is inactive. But think of all the access here, right? You could create inbox rules, maybe exfiltrate some data, sensitive business email compromise, of course, access OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, calendar invites, all the stuff that might come from a Microsoft 365 and Entra ID setup here. And don't forget to use the refresh tokens. Hey, option number 7, I believe that token might only be valid for an hour or so we'll refresh and do that as needed. The pinauth README actually drills into this a little bit. The module uses the refresh token that's provided by OAuth to refresh the access token for another hour. The refresh token is valid for 14 days, while it's only the access token that has an hour. A little bit of idiosyncrasies between the access token, refresh token, but all that stuff to know in the OAuth Cloud M365 world. But if you do want to learn a little bit more about that attack surface, Microsoft 365, more than just the illicit consent grant attack, all the awesome stuff, please do give some love to our sponsor, Altered Security, with the link in the video description. I hope you thought this was cool. I hope you thought this was a neat showcase. Goes to show just that regular screen of, hey, listing all the permissions and access that you're giving consent to. You're granting that with the illicit consent grant attack and how that can be used and abused, especially in Microsoft 365 environments, business email compromise. I know you hear it all the time in the news, but it's another thing thing to see it in action. Oh, and actually, sorry, quick cut, but I did want to showcase on the victim perspective here. If we were to go through this authentication process one more time, let me go to /login and see if that will get started again. You might be able to see as I hover over this link that again could be a button or however you customize and configure this to. You'll note down below the URL here, and let me actually open up like the network tab. If I open this and click that link, you'll see that it goes to the login Microsoft Online. Now, this has already saved that access and credential, so that just logs in and future redirects fine. But this URL, if we copy this, is super duper valuable. If you had some of the network visibility, logging telemetry, you'd be able to see everything that's included here, including the client ID of the rogue application, that's present there, the response type and everything that we might be working with OAuth, and especially the redirect URI. That is just down below. Note, this is the ngrok app, everything that's kind of, hey, faking this social engineering scheme or lure. You get to see the adversary's tradecraft, that URL, and of course the scope, everything that we had noted previously. Let me see if I can find and replace those plus signs. I do have regular expressions enabled with Control-H, Control-Enter, and now you can see all of the scope that would be granted access with this illicit consent grant attack. That's kind of worthwhile and a good breadcrumb if you could track that down. And alongside the URL as a little artifact, if you're looking for more detection capability to be able to see this in action, what other logs or things are left behind. Note I'm in the victim perspective here. This is my QFZ0 tenant. If you went over to the admin section, that'll bring you to admin.microsoft.com. Checking the show all options, you can take a look at the other admin centers, and I believe identity will bring you right over to Entra ID. So as this page loads, we can go take a look at the logs that are present here. Over on the left-hand side, we will show more once again. I do want that monitoring and health section, and the audit logs have some good stuff here for us. You'll be able to see there are usually about 3 of these logs that actually come through. There's adding a delegate permission, there's adding the app role assignment, and then there's the consent to application. We can click into any of these and you can get a little bit more detail. When this all fired off, the IP address that it was coming from, object ID, etc. And there's just some good insight that might be helpful for you if you have the capability to view this and track down this data. Whoa, 365 Stealer from Altered Security has so much cool capability and functionality. Look at all this. Dude, we're gonna have to like record another video just to showcase this capability and that tool. That's pretty sweet. I love the back-end stuff. Oh man, that's so cool to have a nice little like control panel. Export all that, do it easy, small, simple buttons. Point and shoot hacking, just like that. Man, that's why we build out these tools. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe. Do all those YouTube algorithm things. Give some love to the sponsors in the link below. I'll see you in the next video.